21-year-old college student disappeared after his sugar mama discovered his betrayal. Prince thought he was playing the perfect game. He had no idea that accepting Belinda's lavish gifts would cost him his freedom, his sanity, and nearly his life. This handsome young man went from begging friends for pocket money to living like campus royalty overnight. A mysterious 44-year-old businesswoman showered him with cars, apartments, designer clothes, and enough cash to make his classmates call him chairman. But when Prince decided to enjoy other girls while keeping Belinda's money, he triggered a chain of events that would turn his golden paradise into a living nightmare. What started as a mutually beneficial arrangement became a deadly obsession. The woman who promised him everything would soon make sure he could never leave her, literally. Hidden cameras would capture his last moments of freedom. A drugged drink would steal his consciousness, and a secret room would become his prison for months. Stay with us to discover how a simple Instagram post exposed Prince's double life, why a wealthy woman chose kidnapping over heartbreak, and the shocking length someone will go to when they believe money gives them the right to own another human being. You'll witness the terrifying transformation of love into possession, learn how desperation can turn victims into criminals, and uncover the brutal reality of what happens when greed meets obsession. Because this isn't just about a sugar daddy arrangement gone wrong. It's about power, control, and the devastating consequences when two people mistake transaction for affection. The truth in this story will make you question everything you think you know about modern relationships, financial dependence, and the thin line between protection and imprisonment. Prince was the kind of young man who made heads turn without trying. At 21, he possessed that effortless combination of height, lean build, and natural charm that seemed to draw people into his orbit. His smile had a magnetic quality, warm enough to disarm strangers, confident enough to suggest he knew secrets worth sharing. Walking across campus, he moved with the easy grace of someone who understood his own appeal, but hadn't yet learned its true cost. But charm doesn't pay school fees, and good looks don't fill empty stomachs. Prince's reality was far less glamorous than his appearance suggested. While his classmates complained about their allowances being late, Prince was calculating whether he could afford both lunch and transport home. His clothes, though he wore them well, were carefully maintained hand-me-downs from an older cousin. His phone was 3 generations old, held together by hope and electrical tape. The hostel room he shared with 2 other students was a cramped space where privacy meant hanging a bedsheet as a divider. The walls were thin enough that everyone's business became communal knowledge. The bathroom down the hall served 20 students, and hot water was a luxury reserved for those lucky enough to wake up before dawn. This was the world Prince inhabited, a world where dreams of comfort felt as distant as the stars. He watched his wealthier classmates with a mixture of admiration and burning envy. They drove cars that cost more than his family's annual income. They wore sneakers that could have paid his school fees for a semester. They spoke casually about weekend trips to expensive restaurants, about concerts and clubs that charged cover fees he couldn't imagine spending. They lived in a universe parallel to his own, close enough to observe but seemingly impossible to access. Prince's hunger wasn't just for food, though there were days when that was real enough. It was a deeper craving for the soft life, the easy life, the kind of existence where money wasn't a constant source of anxiety. He wanted to walk into a store and buy something without first calculating the cost. He wanted to take a girl on a proper date without worrying about his account balance. He wanted the respect that came with financial security, the confidence that money could provide. One day, he would whisper to himself while watching his classmates from across the lecture hall, one day I'll have all of that. He had no way of knowing that one day was closer than he imagined, and he certainly couldn't have predicted the price he would ultimately pay for it. Chapter 2. The Queen Arrives. Mrs. Belinda Okafor commanded attention the moment she stepped out of her sleek black BMW. At 44, she possessed the kind of beauty that money could maintain and confidence could amplify. Her skin glowed with the health that comes from expensive skincare routines and stress-free living. Her hair was always perfectly styled, her makeup flawlessly applied by professionals who understood that her face was part of her brand. But it wasn't just her physical appearance that made people stop and stare. Belinda moved through the world like someone who owned it. Her designer handbags cost more than most people's cars. Her jewelry caught light from every angle, subtle enough to show taste, expensive enough to demonstrate wealth. When she spoke, people listened, not just because of what she said, but because of the authority in her voice that comes from years of making decisions and seeing them executed without question. Belinda's empire had been built through a combination of shrewd business instincts, calculated risks, and an almost supernatural ability to read people's desires and weaknesses. She owned three successful businesses: a chain of upscale beauty salons, a real estate investment company, and a catering service that served the city's elite. Her house in the exclusive East Legon neighborhood was a monument to her success. Sprawling grounds, imported fixtures, and enough space to host small conferences. Yet, for all her achievements, for all the respect and fear her name commanded in business circles, Belinda harbored a loneliness that money couldn't cure. Her marriage had ended in a bitter divorce 5 years earlier when she discovered her husband had been systematically stealing from her companies to fund his gambling addiction. The betrayal had left scars deeper than financial loss. It had shattered her ability to trust easily. At 44, she found herself surrounded by luxury but starved for genuine connection. The men in her social circle were either intimidated by her success or transparent in their interest in her wealth. Younger men were usually fortune hunters, while men her age seemed threatened by her independence. She had resigned herself to a life of professional accomplishment and personal isolation. Then she met Prince. It happened at a corporate event where she was the keynote speaker. Prince was working part-time as a server, desperately trying to earn money for textbooks. While other servers avoided eye contact with the wealthy guests, Prince looked directly at her when he served her water. His smile was genuine, his "good evening, ma'am," delivered with a respectful confidence that didn't feel rehearsed. Interesting, she thought, watching him navigate between tables with natural grace despite his obvious nervousness. During her speech about entrepreneurship and opportunity, she noticed Prince listening intently from the service area, genuinely engaged with her words rather than simply waiting for his shift to end. When the event concluded, she made a point of finding him. "You were listening," she observed, approaching him as he cleaned glasses. Prince looked up, startled but not intimidated. "Yes, ma'am. What you said about creating opportunities instead of waiting for them, that resonated with me." "And what opportunities are you creating?" she asked, genuinely curious. Prince's honesty surprised her. He spoke about his struggles with school fees, his determination to graduate despite the obstacles, his dreams of building something meaningful with his life. He didn't ask for anything, didn't hint at needing help. He simply shared his reality with a maturity that belied his years. Belinda saw something in that moment that she hadn't encountered in years: authentic ambition, untainted by entitlement. Prince wanted better for himself, but he was willing to work for it. More intriguingly, he looked at her with interest rather than intimidation, as if he saw not just her wealth, but her as a person. Before leaving that night, she handed him her business card. "Call me tomorrow," she said simply. "I think we should continue this conversation." Prince stared at the elegant card long after her BMW had disappeared into the night, not yet understanding that he had just met the woman who would simultaneously fulfill and destroy his dreams. Chapter 3. The Golden Handcuffs. The transformation began subtly, like a beautiful poison spreading slowly through Prince's veins. What started as coffee meetings and business advice evolved into something more complex, more dangerous, and infinitely more seductive. Belinda was masterful in her approach. She didn't overwhelm Prince with gifts immediately. That would have seemed suspicious, even to someone as young and hungry as he was. Instead, she let him experience her world gradually, each taste leaving him craving more. Their first lunch was at a restaurant where the cheapest item on the menu cost more than Prince typically spent on food in a week. She watched him try to mask his amazement at the opulent surroundings, the attentive service, the way other diners looked at their table with a mixture of curiosity and envy. When the bill came, an amount that would have covered Prince's school fees for a month, Belinda paid without even glancing at the total. "This is nice," Prince said, trying to sound casual. "This is normal," Belinda replied with a smile that held promises of so much more. Over the following weeks, she introduced him to her world piece by carefully calculated piece, a shopping trip where she bought him a single designer shirt, claiming she needed a male perspective for a business decision. A ride in her BMW where she let him experience what it felt like to move through the city in air-conditioned comfort, watching the envious stares of pedestrians and commercial bus passengers through tinted windows. Each experience was carefully designed to show Prince what his life could become. And with each taste of luxury, his old life felt increasingly unbearable. The hostel room seemed smaller, shabbier. His classmates' problems seemed petty when he had glimpsed what real comfort looked like. The gap between his reality and his desires had been bridged just enough for him to see across it, but not enough to feel secure on the other side. Then came the conversation that changed everything. They were in her car after another expensive dinner, and when Belinda turned to him with an expression more serious than he had ever seen her wear. "Prince, I want to make you an offer," she began, her voice carrying the weight of a business proposition. "I see potential in you. Intelligence, ambition, charm. But I also see you struggling, wasting energy on survival when you could be focusing on growth." Prince felt his heart racing but tried to maintain his composure. "What kind of offer?" "I want to invest in you," she said, letting the words hang in the air between them. "Your school fees paid in full. A proper apartment, not that cramped hostel room. A car so you don't have to depend on public transport. Clothes that match your potential. Money in your pocket so you can focus on your studies instead of worrying about your next meal." The offer was everything Prince had dreamed of, and more. But Belinda's next words carried a weight that should have frightened him. "In return, you become mine. Exclusively mine. No other women, no other distractions. You focus on school and on me. After graduation, we make this permanent. Marriage, a proper future together." Prince's mind raced through the implications. Belinda was offering him not just comfort, but transformation. The boy who had begged friends for transport money could become the man who drove his own car. The student who calculated the cost of every meal could become someone who never worried about money again. But marriage? To a woman 23 years his senior? The age gap felt enormous in that moment, though her beauty and sophistication had made it seem less significant during their previous meetings. "Think about it," Belinda continued, reaching into her purse and pulling out an envelope. "This is just the down payment, enough to cover this semester's fees and get you started in your new apartment." Prince opened the envelope and felt his breath catch. The amount of cash inside represented more money than he had ever held at one time. It was real, tangible proof that this wasn't a dream or a cruel joke. "I don't expect an answer tonight," Belinda said, though her eyes suggested otherwise. "But I do expect honesty. If you accept this, you accept all of it. The luxury comes with loyalty. The comfort comes with commitment." As Prince sat in his cramped hostel room that night, counting and recounting the money, he told himself he was making a practical decision. Belinda was beautiful, successful, and clearly interested in his future. Many men would consider themselves lucky to have such an opportunity. What he failed to recognize was that he wasn't accepting an offer. He was stepping into a trap that had been designed specifically for someone with his hunger, his desperation, and his naive belief that he was smart enough to control the situation. The next morning, he called Belinda and spoke the words that would eventually lead him to a hidden room, where freedom became a memory and luxury transformed into a prison. "I accept." Chapter 4. The Chairman's Rise. The metamorphosis was breathtaking to witness. Within 2 weeks of accepting Belinda's proposal, Prince had shed his old life like a snake discarding outgrown skin. The transformation was so complete that his former classmates began to wonder if they had ever really known him at all. His new apartment was everything the hostel room wasn't: spacious, private, and furnished with the kind of attention to detail that spoke of serious money. The bed was large enough for 3 people, covered in Egyptian cotton sheets that felt like silk against his skin. The bathroom featured a shower with water pressure he hadn't known existed, and towels so thick they seemed designed more for comfort than function. But it was the car that truly announced his new status. The Honda Accord wasn't the most expensive vehicle on campus, but it was undeniably his. When Prince drove through the university gates for the first time, conversation stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned, fingers pointed. The boy who used to beg rides from friends now had a parking space with his name on it. His wardrobe underwent an equally dramatic renovation. Gone were the carefully maintained hand-me-downs and bargain bin finds. In their place hung designer shirts, perfectly fitted jeans, and shoes that cost more than some families' monthly income. Prince learned to dress not just well, but strategically. Each outfit calculated to project success without appearing to try too hard. The most significant change, however, was in how people treated him. Classmates who had barely acknowledged his existence suddenly wanted to be his friend. Girls who had looked through him now smiled when he passed. Restaurant servers treated him with the deference reserved for valued customers. Even professors seemed to regard him with new interest, as if success were contagious and they wanted to catch it. Prince reveled in his new reality. He began hosting small parties in his apartment, providing alcohol and snacks that would have been unthinkable luxuries just weeks earlier. His friends came not just for the free drinks, but for the proximity to transformation. They wanted to understand how someone could change so completely, so quickly. "How did you do it?" they would ask, eyes wide with admiration and envy. Prince had perfected his response, a mysterious smile and a vague reference to investments and opportunities. He never mentioned Belinda directly, though campus gossip mills had begun to speculate about his mysterious benefactor. Someone had seen him with an older woman. Someone else had spotted him at expensive restaurants where students couldn't afford to eat. The rumors swirled, but Prince neither confirmed nor denied them. The nickname Chairman emerged organically from his transformed circumstances. It started as a joke among his friends, a playful reference to his sudden elevation in status, but quickly became the name everyone used. Prince embraced it eagerly, understanding that nicknames like that weren't given, they were earned. And he had earned his through the simple act of accepting Belinda's offer. At parties, Prince moved with the confidence of someone who never had to check his account balance before making a purchase. He bought rounds of drinks without calculating the cost. He ordered food delivery from expensive restaurants while his friends watched in amazement. He had become the person he had always dreamed of being, generous, carefree, and enviably comfortable. But beneath the surface of his transformed life, cracks were beginning to form. Maintaining his relationship with Belinda required more energy than he had anticipated. She expected regular calls, frequent visits, and constant reassurance that he was honoring their agreement. Her questions about his daily activities felt increasingly invasive, though he dismissed them as the natural concern of someone who had invested heavily in his future. More troubling were the moments when Belinda's affection felt less like love and more like ownership. The way she spoke about their future together had an unsettling finality to it, as if his preferences were irrelevant to plans she had already made. When other women looked at him with interest, and they did frequently now that he radiated success, Belinda's grip on his arm would tighten almost imperceptibly. "You remember our agreement," she would whisper during these moments, her voice carrying a warning disguised as a reminder. Prince assured her constantly that he remembered, that he was committed, that she had nothing to worry about. And during daylight hours, surrounded by the comfort and respect that her money had bought him, those assurances felt genuine. It was at night, alone in his expensive apartment, that doubts crept in. Prince was 21 years old, handsome, and suddenly more attractive than he had ever been. Girls noticed him everywhere he went, in classes, at parties, walking across campus. Some were subtle in their interest, others refreshingly direct. All of them represented possibilities he had never had access to before. The internal conflict was agonizing. He owed everything to Belinda: his comfort, his status, his transformation from struggling student to campus royalty. But he was also young, newly confident, and surrounded by opportunities that felt increasingly difficult to ignore. Prince told himself he could maintain the balance. He could honor his commitment to Belinda while enjoying the attention that came with his new status. He could be grateful for what she had given him without feeling completely owned by her. What he failed to understand was that Belinda hadn't built her empire by accepting half measures or tolerating divided loyalties. She had invested in Prince with the same strategic thinking she applied to all her business ventures, and she expected returns on that investment that were both substantial and exclusive. The collision between Prince's youthful desires and Belinda's possessive expectations was inevitable. The only question was how devastating the impact would be when it finally occurred. Chapter 5. The Double Life. The first betrayal was almost innocent, a moment of weakness disguised as harmless flirtation. Her name was Sandra, a second-year law student with honey-colored skin, and the kind of laugh that made Prince forget about consequences. She approached him at a campus party where he was playing his familiar role as the generous host, buying drinks and basking in the admiration of his peers. "So you're the famous chairman," Sandra said, appearing beside him with a smile that felt like a challenge. "Famous might be an exaggeration," Prince replied, though he was clearly pleased by the description. "Really? Because everyone talks about you. The boy who went from broke to baller overnight. People are curious about your story." Their conversation flowed with the easy chemistry of two people who recognized something appealing in each other. Sandra was intelligent, confident, and refreshingly direct about her interest. She didn't seem intimidated by his newfound wealth or status. If anything, she appeared amused by the transformation everyone else found so impressive. "Want to get some air?" she suggested as the party grew louder around them. They stepped onto the apartment's small balcony, the noise of the party fading to a manageable hum behind them. The night air was cool and the campus lights spread out below them like a constellation of possibilities. "Can I ask you something?" Sandra said, leaning against the balcony railing. "Do you ever miss being regular?" The question caught Prince off guard. "What do you mean?" Before all this, she gestured at his apartment, his expensive clothes, the party happening behind them. "When you were just another student trying to figure things out. Do you miss that simplicity?" Prince considered the question seriously, perhaps more seriously than he had considered anything in weeks. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but not enough to go back to struggling for transport money." Sandra laughed, and the sound sent an unexpected warmth through Prince's chest. "Fair enough, though I have to say I think I prefer regular Prince to Chairman Prince." "You didn't know regular Prince," he pointed out. "Maybe not, but I can see him in there, underneath all the designer clothes and expensive confidence. He seems more interesting than this version." Their eyes met, and Prince felt something he hadn't experienced since accepting Belinda's offer. The thrill of genuine connection with someone his own age. Someone who saw through his transformation to whatever remained of his authentic self. That night, nothing happened beyond conversation and the kind of charged glances that leave both parties thinking about possibilities. But something had shifted. Prince found himself looking forward to seeing Sandra again, to continuing conversations that felt natural rather than obligatory. Over the following weeks, what began as casual campus encounters evolved into something more deliberate. Sandra would find reasons to walk past his apartment building. Prince would time his coffee breaks to coincide with her class schedule. They developed the elaborate dance of two people who are attracted to each other, but haven't yet crossed the line into action. The transition from innocent flirtation to physical betrayal happened gradually, then all at once. A study session that ran late, a moment when Sandra moved closer to him while they reviewed notes. A look that lingered too long, followed by a kiss that crossed every boundary Prince had promised Belinda he would maintain. "We shouldn't be doing this," Prince whispered, even as he pulled Sandra closer. "Probably not," she agreed, but made no move to stop. The guilt was immediate and overwhelming, but it was also intoxicating. Prince had forgotten what it felt like to be with someone who wanted him for himself, rather than as a project or investment. Sandra's interest felt pure in a way that Belinda's never had, free from ulterior motives or complex power dynamics. What followed were months of careful deception. Prince became a master of compartmentalization, maintaining his role as Belinda's devoted protege while pursuing his relationship with Sandra with increasing boldness. He learned to check his phone compulsively, deleting messages and clearing call logs. He became expert at manufacturing explanations for his whereabouts and alibis for his time. The stress of living a double life was exhausting, but it was also addictive. Prince felt clever, successful, and desired by two very different women, for very different reasons. He told himself he was young and deserved to enjoy both the security Belinda provided and the authentic connection he felt with Sandra. His friends, unaware of the full complexity of his situation, admired what they saw as his incredible luck. "This guy has everything," they would say when Prince wasn't listening. "Money, respect, and he's pulling girls left and right. Living the dream." Prince began to believe his own press. He convinced himself he was skilled enough to manage both relationships indefinitely, smart enough to give each woman what she needed without either discovering the other's existence. The success of his deception bred overconfidence, and overconfidence bred carelessness. The first sign of trouble came when Belinda began asking more specific questions about his daily activities. Her casual inquiries about his classes, his friends, and his social life took on an edge of suspicion that Prince tried to dismiss as natural curiosity. "You seem distracted lately," she observed during one of their dinner dates. "Just stressed about exams," Prince replied smoothly. "You know how it is." But Belinda's instincts, honed by years of reading people's motivations and detecting deception in business negotiations, were beginning to sense something amiss. Prince's assurances felt less convincing than they once had. His affection seemed more performative, less spontaneous. Meanwhile, Sandra was growing frustrated with the secrecy surrounding their relationship. She understood that Prince's financial situation was complicated, but she didn't understand why their connection had to be so carefully hidden. "I'm not asking to meet your sponsor," Sandra said one evening after Prince had cut their time together, short to attend one of Belinda's social functions. "But I am asking to exist in your life as more than a secret." Prince found himself caught between two women with increasingly incompatible expectations, trying to satisfy both while fully committing to neither. He was walking a tightrope that was growing thinner with each passing day, and he was about to discover that some falls can destroy everything you thought you had built. The end of his careful balancing act would come not through grand revelation or dramatic confrontation, but through something as simple and devastating as a single social media post. A moment of carelessness that would unravel months of deception and trigger consequences more severe than his worst nightmares could have imagined. Chapter 6. The Unraveling. Sandra posted the photo on a Tuesday evening without thinking twice about it. In her mind, it was a beautiful moment worth sharing. Herself and Prince at a small cafe near campus, his arm around her shoulders, both of them laughing at something he had just whispered in her ear. The lighting was perfect, their happiness genuine, and the caption simple. "Good times with this one." To Sandra, it was just another social media post celebrating a relationship that made her happy. To her followers, it was confirmation of rumors that had been circulating for weeks about Prince's mysterious romantic life. But to Belinda, scrolling through Instagram at midnight in her empty mansion, it was a declaration of war. She stared at the screen for a long time, studying every detail of the image. Prince's genuine smile, so different from the calculated expressions he wore during their time together. Sandra's natural beauty, unmarked by the expensive maintenance that Belinda had to invest in to maintain her appearance. The casual intimacy of their body language, the kind that comes from real affection rather than obligation or transaction. But it wasn't just the photo that destroyed Belinda in that moment. It was the realization of how thoroughly she had been played. Every reassurance Prince had given her, every promise of loyalty, every declaration of commitment had been a lie. While she had been planning their future together, he had been building a completely separate life with someone his own age. The betrayal cut deeper than infidelity. It was a fundamental violation of the agreement that had governed their entire relationship. Belinda hadn't just been supporting a boyfriend, she had been investing in what she believed was a mutual future, paying for exclusivity and loyalty that Prince had never actually provided. She didn't call him immediately. Instead, she sat in her study, surrounded by the fruits of her success, and felt something cold and calculating settle into her chest. The business instincts that had built her empire began to analyze the situation with the same strategic thinking she applied to her companies. Prince had stolen from her. Not money. Money could be replaced, but time, trust, and the future she had envisioned. He had taken her investment and used it to make himself more attractive to other women. He had used her transformation of him as a tool to betray her with someone younger, someone who could offer him things that Belinda never could. The humiliation was almost worse than the betrayal. How many people knew about Sandra? How many of Prince's friends were laughing behind her back about the older woman who was paying for her young boyfriend's lifestyle while he entertained girls his own age? How many times had he made love to Sandra using energy that belonged to Belinda, in an apartment she had paid for, wearing clothes she had bought? By morning, Belinda had made her decision. But unlike Prince, who had acted impulsively and carelessly, she would be methodical, strategic. She would use the same patience and planning that had made her successful to ensure that Prince learned the true cost of betrayal. The call came on a Friday afternoon, Belinda's voice warm and loving as if nothing had changed. "Baby, I've missed you so much," she said when Prince answered. "I know you're stressed about exams, but I think you need a break. Come over tomorrow evening. I have a surprise for you." Prince felt a wave of guilt wash over him. Belinda sounded genuinely affectionate, and he realized he had been neglecting her in favor of his time with Sandra. "Of course, baby. What kind of surprise?" "Something special, just for us." "And Prince? I've been thinking about our future together. I'm ready to make some big changes, some big investments in us. We need to talk about taking the next step." The mention of money and investment sent a familiar thrill through Prince. Despite everything, despite his genuine feelings for Sandra, the security that Belinda represented was still intoxicating. "I'll be there," he promised. "Good boy," Belinda replied, and there was something in her tone, satisfaction perhaps, or anticipation, that should have alarmed him. But Prince was too caught up in his double life to recognize danger when it whispered sweet words through the phone. He had no way of knowing that Belinda had already begun preparing the room where his freedom would end, or that the surprise she mentioned would be the last thing he remembered before waking up in a world where choice was no longer an option. Saturday evening approached with Prince blissfully unaware that he was walking toward a trap designed specifically for someone with his particular combination of greed, guilt, and naive confidence in his ability to control powerful people. As he drove toward Belinda's mansion for what he thought would be another evening of managing his complex relationships, Prince was actually driving toward the end of his carefully constructed double life, and the beginning of a nightmare that would teach him the difference between being desired and being owned. The transformation from student to prisoner would happen as quickly as his transformation from poor to privileged had months earlier. But this change would strip away everything he had gained and more. Much more. Epilogue. The price of playing games. The courtroom was packed with journalists, curious spectators, and social media influencers eager to witness the conclusion of what had become one of the year's most shocking criminal cases. News outlets had been following the story since Prince's rescue, turning it into a cautionary tale about modern relationships, financial dependence, and the dark side of sugar daddy arrangements. Belinda sat in the defendant's chair looking nothing like the powerful businesswoman who had once commanded respect throughout the city. Prison had stripped away her polished veneer, revealing someone smaller, older, and frightened. Her empire had crumbled during her incarceration. Businesses sold, properties seized to pay legal fees, and a reputation built over decades destroyed in a matter of months. The judge's sentence was severe: 15 years in prison for kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, and sexual assault. As the verdict was read, cameras captured Belinda's reaction. Not the defiant anger of someone who believed they had been wronged, but the hollow expression of someone finally understanding the magnitude of their actions. Prince sat in the gallery, barely recognizable as the confident young man who had once been called chairman. The physical healing had been easier than the psychological recovery. Months of therapy had helped him process the trauma, but the nightmares persisted. More challenging was learning to trust again, to believe that relationships could be based on genuine affection rather than transaction or control. He had never returned to campus. The stares, whispers, and questions had made completing his education impossible in that environment. Instead, he had transferred to a different university in another city, starting over with a new identity carefully scrubbed of his social media presence and public notoriety. The money was gone, of course. Gone of the apartment, the car, the expensive clothes. All of it had been evidence in a criminal trial that revealed the true cost of luxury purchased with someone else's obsession. Prince lived modestly now, working part-time jobs to support himself while slowly completing his degree. The boy who had once dreamed of the soft life had learned to find satisfaction in simple independence. Most significantly, Prince had developed an almost pathological aversion to financial dependence. He had learned through the most brutal possible experience that money is never truly free. It always comes with strings, expectations, and the potential for those strings to become chains. In quiet moments, usually late at night when sleep eluded him, Prince reflected on the choices that had led him to Belinda's secret room. He understood now that his hunger for luxury had made him an easy target for someone who viewed affection as a commodity to be purchased and controlled. His mistake hadn't been accepting Belinda's initial offer, it had been believing he could take her money while maintaining his autonomy. But perhaps the most haunting realization was how close he had come to becoming someone else entirely. If Belinda's obsession hadn't turned violent, if their arrangement had continued indefinitely, Prince might have become a permanent prisoner of a different sort, trapped not in a hidden room, but in a golden cage of comfort and dependence that felt like freedom but wasn't. The story became a viral cautionary tale, shared across social media platforms with warnings about sugar daddy relationships and financial manipulation. University counselors used it in presentations about healthy relationships and financial independence. Parents shared it with their children as a stark example of how quickly desperation could lead to dangerous situations. Yet, for all the public attention and moral lessons drawn from their story, the most important truths were more personal and complex. Prince had learned that real wealth isn't measured in material possessions, but in the freedom to make choices without coercion. Belinda had discovered that love cannot be purchased, controlled, or imprisoned. Attempts to do so only create elaborate forms of self-destruction. Years later, when Prince finally graduated from his new university and began building a career based on his own efforts, he would sometimes think about the boy who had been so hungry for the soft life that he had been willing to risk everything to taste it. That boy seemed like a different person now. Younger, more naive, and tragically unaware of the difference between having dreams and being consumed by them. The lessons learned in Belinda's hidden room had cost Prince nearly everything he thought he wanted, but they had taught him something invaluable. The most expensive luxury in life is the freedom to choose who you become, and that freedom can never be purchased with someone else's money. It can only be earned through the sometimes difficult but ultimately liberating process of becoming genuinely self-sufficient. In a world where social media celebrates quick transformations and instant wealth, Prince's story serves as a stark reminder that some prices are too high to pay, no matter how appealing the rewards might seem. True success, he had learned, isn't about escaping your circumstances through someone else's generosity. It's about developing the skills, patience, and integrity to transform your own life on your own terms. The boy who had once been called chairman had finally learned to be something far more valuable, a man who belonged entirely to himself. From